Welcome back. In the previous step, we implemented a little bit of logic around authentication for the username and password. When I enter a valid user ID and password, what should happen typically? I should go to a welcome page, right? But that's not really happening in here. So when I enter a proper user ID and password, what should happen? Right now, we are inside the login component. What we want to do is go from the login component to the welcome component. How do we do that? That's basically where routing comes into picture. You would want to be routed from the login component to the welcome component. Let's look at the basics of routing and try and implement a little bit of routing in this specific video. When we were creating the Angular application using ng-new, one of the questions which we were asked was, do we need routing? And we said, yes, we need routing. And that's where we got a specific file called app routing module. So this is the module which would handle all the routing for us. Over here, routes, where we can define all the routes which we want to use in this specific application. Let's take an example. So for the welcome component, I would want to create a new route called welcome. The way I can do that is by defining an object in here. So I'll define an object. The first attribute is something called path. So what is the path at which you would want to expose this? So path is welcome, and which component defines that? The component which defines that is login component. What you can do is type in login component and press enter. So what it does is it automatically imports the login.component. You would see that as soon as I press enter, what would happen is an import is present in here. As we discussed earlier about importing classes from other modules, this login.component contains the definition for this specific class. So if app routing module wants to make use of it, this specific class wants to make use of another class, it needs to be imported in. Actually, what we'll do is we'll map the path login to the login component, and for the welcome component, we'll map welcome. So I'm copying, this is an array. So you can see that this is within square brackets, this is an array. So I can have multiple objects separated by comma. So now we are defining a path to the login component as well as to the welcome component. So what would happen now? Let's see. If I type in localhost 4200/welcome, what would happen? You'd see that there are no errors which are being shown, but the welcome page is not really shown. When I say login, the same thing. The welcome page is not being shown. The login page is being shown by default, but there are no errors. If I say login 123, you'd see that there are errors which are shown because login 123 is not something which we have defined in here. So it says I cannot match a route. I don't know what is login 123. The cool thing is now we see that router is in play, but we were not able to use it yet. The thing is, there is a tag for router which you need to use to enable routing. Let's go to the app.component.html. That's the first component which is loaded. Inside here, earlier we had commented something called router outlet. What I'll do is I'll remove this comment and just comment the app login part right now. So what we have in here active is just the router outlet. So this is the tag which enables the display of whatever output which router is producing. So now you would see when I say localhost 4200, you are not seeing anything because we have not defined a route for it. But when I say localhost 4200/login, what will you see? The login page. When I say localhost 4200/welcome, you see the welcome page. It says welcome works. One of the things I would typically like to do is inside the routing module, let's add another route for the login component. So I'll say path. The default path goes to the login component, right? So that's what we would want to do. So even when you type in localhost 4200, it would go to the login page. Isn't that cool? The other thing is when you type in localhost 4200/ let's say login and some garbage, what is happening? Oops, you are getting an error. Do you want to show this kind of errors to your user? No. So what we'll do is we'll create a error component. Let's go back to command prompt or the terminal where we are using the ng generate commands. Make sure that you are inside the current folder. So this is a to-do project that we are working with, and I would want to generate a error component. So this error component would be used as the display page when something wrong happens. Let's open up error.component.html. It says error works. Some error happened. Typically, instead of hard coding the text in here, what would we do? Error.component.ts, and I'll have an error message here, right? So error message, an error occurred, contact support at ... And what we'll do is over here use interpolation to show the error message. Now if you go here and type in /garbage, oops, still an error. What should you do? We have not really added that component to the routing, right? So let's add that to the routing. How do you add it? **. So what we are saying is these are the paths which are defined. Anything else, route it to the error component. Press enter. Error component is now imported in. I need to have a comma and save this. Control B and right click, format. Okay, this looks good. Now let's go ahead and try it again. Awesome. It says an error occurred, contact support. This page can be further enhanced a little later. In this step, we implemented routing. We added paths to all the components, to the login component, to the welcome component, and we also created an error component just in case a user types in an invalid URL. The module you are looking at, the app routing module, is responsible for initialization of the routes. The other thing which we looked at was the fact that we needed to add a tag called router outlet. This makes sure that the entire control now is in the hands of the application routing module. We'll talk more about routing as we go on. I'll see you in the next step.